Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Qatar Masters being played here in the great city of Doha. Now, this is my return to playing over-the-board chess, the first event I've played since the FIDE World Cup back in August. Prior to that, I had played in Norway chess, so I haven't really played a whole lot of classical chess. But at the end of the day, if I play well in the next two tournaments, I have a great chance at qualifying for the candidates. And for you guys, the fans, that is all that matters. So, all right. First game here in the Qatar Masters. I'm playing with the black pieces against another talented Indian junior, Vantika Agrawal, 21 years old, rated 2435. I believe she's currently the fifth highest rated Indian female player. So she starts with d4. Now, one difference with this tournament is that it's an open event. It's, I believe, 10 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. I could have the number of rounds wrong, but let's assume it's 10 for right now. It's an open tournament, so you get to play against a lot of players in different rating ranges. In the first round, I'm playing against someone who's about 350 points lower rated, so there's a lot of pressure on me to try and win this game. So I play knight f6. We get the move c4 being played here. After c4 in this position, I choose to play the move e6. Actually, I was going to go on a different tangent as well before we get too deep in the weeds. There was a technical meeting this morning about 10 o'clock with the round being held at 3. As such, the pairings only came out around 11:30 this morning. And due to jet lag, I was actually asleep until about 12:45. So I did some very light preparation. Now, fortunately for me, my first round opponent pretty much exclusively plays the Catalan opening here with d4, c4, knight f3, and g3. So in this position, I decide to play the move bishop to b4. She plays bishop d2, bishop e7. We get bishop g2, and now I play knight e4. Normally, in the past, when I've played this line with bishop b4 check and bishop e7 back, usually I continue with castles, queen c2, and then knight e4, or for example, castles, knight e4, queen c2, and then c6 or f5. But again, I'm playing someone much lower rated. I want to take some risks, try to imbalance it very quickly. So I play knight e4, she plays queen c2, I play c6, she castles, knight d7, knight c3, and now I play f5 right away. Now, one of the big advantages to playing like this and not castling is that what I really want to do here is I want to go on the offensive. So if she'd played bishop f4, which is one of the standard moves and a lot of these variations in the Catalan, I could play g5, bishop c1, and right away I can play h5, f5, h4, and I'm attacking very, very quickly on the king side here because I have not castled my king. Now, it looks a little bit barbaric. It's probably not actually all that great in reality, but it looks very scary to face. So Vantika plays knight to c3. I play f5 here. Now, of course, we have the classic Stonewall Jackson setup with the pawns in the center here, and she plays the move knight takes e4. Now, I was still in my preparation at this point. My opponent had used about 35 to 40 minutes. I had used pretty much no time, so I'm feeling very good, and then she trades a knight. Now, as soon as Vantika traded the knights on e4, I was not happy at all. And the reason that I was so unhappy is because what I realized to my horror is that when I try to invert the order, try to play it a little bit differently, I want to create a big imbalance. Now, when I'm trying to create the imbalance, what I mean by that is usually perhaps like there could be a piece differential sacking a rook for a knight, but normally a lot of it is about the pawn structure. So when knight takes e4 is played here in this position, I realize that if I take with the f-pawn like I did in the game, after knight to e5, my opponent's plan is very simple. Let's just say I go knight f6, white wants to play f3, takes, castles, and maybe down the road something like bishop c3 and e4. Now in this position, white has a nice advantage. You've got a great knight on e5 here, which is supported by the pawn. White has these pawns in the center, and it's just too easy to play. Now, essentially what I start thinking about during the game here at this point is I'm thinking about where can I create an imbalance where her moves or ideas will not be straightforward. So I actually spent a lot of time here about 20 minutes. I considered playing d takes e4. I chose not to play d takes e4 in this position, and the reason is that after knight to e5, initially I wanted to trade on e5 and play h5, trying to attack very quickly. Like white goes f3 here, there might be bishop c5, king h1, and then h4, and just like that, there's a very serious attack on the king side here, and white is in a lot of trouble. But in this position after h5, white can play the move rook a to d1, and if I go h4 here trying to attack, white can create a fossil with bishop to b4 attacking the queen, and after queen c7, white can play bishop e7, queen to e7, and now after this move, rook to d6 here, white has a big advantage, primarily because white can create the double stack on the d file or even a legendary triple stack, and my bishop on c8 is terrible with all these pawns in the way. So I really wanted to play d takes e4, but then I thought after knight e5, even if I were to play this move, knight takes e5, d takes e5, and castles, for example, after bishop c3, white just wants to go f3 and rook to d1, and it's very, very straightforward. Now, for those of you guys who are beginner who are watching, which is the vast majority, when I say it's very easy, you're probably like, what are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense at all. But what I mean by that is for someone who is probably I would say above master level. In this position, there are a couple drawbacks for both sides. The big drawback for black is that I have this light square bishop locked in behind this pawn wall. For white, it's the same issue. White's bishop is locked in by my pawns on this diagonal. Additionally, white has the double e pawns as well, which can be weak, but in general, the main idea here is, let's say I go queen c7, white can play f3. If I go e3 here, after f4, the pawn on e3 will become weak very, very quickly. And after e takes f3, white has two ways of capturing. White can take with the bishop here, and after, say, bishop d7, rook d1, let's just say rook d8. White can even play e4 here, and after takes, we have a very symmetrical, I guess it's not identically symmetrical, but the pawns are on the same files here. And once again, there's no major imbalance with the pawn structure. So that's why I actually chose not to take with d takes e4, because I figured that even though I felt like I could be okay, it would be too easy for her to play the position with f3 and e4, or bishop c3 and rook d1, and I thought the chances of winning the game were fairly low. So I decided to take with the f-pawn. She plays knight e5 anyway. I trade the knights, and now I castle here, and she plays rook a d1. Now, rook a d1 is an excellent move. I actually thought white could maybe play f4 in this position, already asking black a big question. Are you going to play end peasant with e takes f3 and reach the structure where white has the 4 connected, and you have the 4 connected here in the center? Should I go for this or not go for this? So I was actually very worried about f4 here. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I thought probably I would play b5 here, trying to force white to make a decision on the queen side. But after, say, c takes d5, c takes d5, and rook a c1, I feel like white is gaining some control on this open c file, and I think white should be better. So I was very happy to see rook a d1, because after rook a d1, I can play b6 here, and now I have ideas to fianchetto the bishop on this long diagonal. I also can try to bring my queen to e8 and h5 as well. So here she played bishop e3, another move that I don't like. I really think, again, that my opponent should have played f4 here to force me to decide whether I was going to play end peasant, whether I was going to try to play this position, which is very cloggy here. The center is very, very clogged here. White has this connect 4. I've got my connect 5. But again, the bishops, both light square bishops, aren't great here. I think in general, it's pretty close to even. But more than being close to even, I think the problem is it's very hard to come up with a plan for either side. And in this case, where I'm 350 points higher rated than my opponent, that is a big no-no, because I need to win the game. And I do think it's really important for players who are like 2450, 2500. They do need to remember when they're playing a top player in an open like the Qatar Masters, that generally it's on your opponent, the stronger player, to win the game. They have to take risks and prove it. You can just sort of be very, very solid. And then if they take too much risk, you can potentially even get a big win against a top 10 player. So in this position, I play b6. She goes bishop e3. I play queen e8. Important move. If I were to play bishop b7, I simply hang the pawn on e4 due to the classic pin. So I go queen e8, sidestepping it. We get f3 here, and now I play bishop a6. Now, when all is said and done, Vantika does finally get f3, trying to open up this diagonal. But in the process, I have now actually activated my light square bishop, and white doesn't get a forced trade on f3, which means that there will be more play in the position. So she plays b3 here, guarding the pawn. Now, this was a mistake. One thing that I was taking into account as we were playing these moves is I was trying to pick up my speed and get her low on the clock or under some time pressure, because I did feel that with less time, if I could complicate here, where there's a little bit more chaos in the center, for example, the chances of her blundering are much higher. So up to this point, I mean, I'm using my time, but around the time that she plays b3, I start picking up the pace. I play e takes f3 in 6 minutes. She takes back to the pawn. Now, this was a move that she took way too long. And one thing that I will always say to players, doesn't matter what your rating level is, time matters. Time is a serious part of the game. And in this position, my opponent Vantika has 33 minutes, nearly 34, 33, 41, nearly 34 minutes. When I take on f3, she should make up her mind very quickly, within 1 or 2 minutes, how she's going to capture. She's going to take with the pawn, the rook, or the bishop, but make up your mind very quickly. Instead, she spends nearly 11 minutes taking on f3, and now I play queen g6 very, very quickly after 3 moves. Here, I'm trying to build up the pressure on the clock, get her low, and hopefully she'll make a mistake. Now, at this point, I was already feeling very, very happy with the position. I actually thought that after e takes f3, she should take with the rook here, force some rooks off the board. Say we trade here, I play like rook d8, for example. I did not really see why I should be better in this position, because my dark square bishop is really hemmed in by the pawns as well as white's dark square bishop, and I just think white has no issues whatsoever. But when she takes 11 minutes to capture, while she was thinking, I was thinking on her time, so that's why I was able to play queen g6 very quickly. Now she plays queen c1, which is a great move, but again, she uses 7 minutes on this move. Now, on first glance, you're probably thinking, well, why doesn't white trade the queens and go bishop h3? But in this position after king f7, my pawn structure is actually very, very solid here in the center. White has this weak pawn on c4, and I can even go rook d8 down the line, so I should be okay. Additionally, it's an endgame, and I do love playing endgames against weaker rated or lower rated players, I should say, so I would have been pretty happy. So she goes queen c1, which is a good move. I play rook a d8 here, which apparently is not best. I probably at this point should have released the tension in the center by trading and then playing rook a d8, because now after f4, I think there's rook to d3, which is actually very complicated. White's apparently better here after trades and rook d1, but black probably has some chances to save the game, although computer is starting to think that white might even be significantly better. So, at any rate, though, in this position, I'm trying to find a way to keep pieces on the board, keep the position closed. I'm waiting for a build-up until she gets really low on time. So after rook d8, she plays f4 here, creating the connect 4 and opening up the scope for the light square bishop on g2. And now I play h5. Now, pretty much as soon as she played f4, I was very mad at myself. Now, again, I played rook d8 in about 2.5 minutes, trying to keep the pressure up on the clock. But I do feel that if I was going to move very quickly, I probably should have just played h5 here, because now after f4, h4, white can't really push the pawn forward. Maybe white is better after king f2, but you'll see very soon why this would have been a better version. So I go rook d8, f4, and h5 here. And I was feeling good for a second until I realized that she could play bishop h3 here, which now puts a lot of pressure on his pawn on e6. But also if I play h4, white can potentially go g4 or queen b1. Now, in this position, after bishop h2 was played, again, she used nearly 5 minutes on this move. At this point, I decided to do the classic gamble by playing h4. Now, I knew this was not a good move when I played it, but I figured at this point in the game where I'm move 20, my opponent has 10 minutes, I've got 35 minutes, I might as well go for it, because if I draw this game, if I try to stay solid and draw, I will lose 3 rating points. I already will have given up the rating advantage I have on Ali Reza after the very first game of this tournament. And frankly, if I'm playing at 2400 and I can't take that risk, then what am I playing for at all? So that's sort of how I felt. And I think, again, to reminisce about another tournament, there's another event going on in St. Louis, Missouri called the United States Chess Championship. And Levon Aronian actually made a very, very quick draw, I think in 8 moves against Andrew Tang. Fabiano Caruana, a couple days later, comes back, plays the same line, but changes the move order a little bit, wins a nice crushing game to take a clear lead in that tournament. And so sometimes when you're playing lower rated players, you just have to go for it. You got to go all in. You cannot hold back. So I played h4 here, and now Vantika blunders with the move king f2. Now, during the game, I was very concerned about queen to b1, offering the trade of the queens. If, for example, I were to trade the queens on b1 here, after queen b1 and rook, not rook takes b1, sorry. After queen takes b1, white can take first with check on e6. And now after king h8, rook takes queen, white is just up a pawn here and completely winning. So I was very scared. Now, if she had played queen b1, I was going to go queen h6, hoping that she would see that suddenly there are all kinds of threats. First of all, if white just plays a random move like rook e1, I can take and win this pawn. Secondly, if white tries to guard with like rook c1, now I take this one, and suddenly the bishop on h3 is under attack, and we have a classic right triangle. So at this point, I saw that she could play g4 here, which gambits a pawn, and it's very, very tricky, because if I play d takes c4, now white can play this move. I believe rook takes d8 first, rook takes d8, and then g5 attacking the queen. I have no squares to guard the pawn on e6 here, because the white queen covers g6. And once I go queen h5, bishop takes e6, king h8, and b takes c4. It looks scary from a distance after queen to e2, but white has this very nice move, queen to e1, offering the trade of the queens and threatening checkmate in Uno with queen takes h4. So I did see this. What I was going to do actually after queen b1 was play queen h6, g4, and I was going to go d takes c4, takes, and I was hoping for this actually. I went over the line already, so I'm crisscrossing, but I was going to play this line with queen h5, and I was hoping there would be some play. Alas, she doesn't play queen b1 here. She plays king f2, and now I'm able to take on c4 and go c5. And here, just like that, if anybody is better, it is black. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. The pawn on c4 is always a target now. The bishop can target it. Also, I can try to use the other diagonal for the light square bishop. White's king on f2 is looking a little bit ridiculous here. It's just walking into pins and threats on the f and g file. So white has all these issues to deal with. Now Vantika plays queen b1, but this is played after a 3-minute thing, and now it's starting to get very dire, because when I go queen h6 here, white cannot play g4, because now I take the pawn, and after white goes g5, first of all, I can just take the pawn due to the pin, but even without bishop takes g5, I can play queen h5, because the bishop on c4 guards the pawn on e6 now, and I'm simply winning the game. So there's a huge difference. And she plays this move queen e4. I take on g3. And now she uses a minute and a half to take on g3. Now, apparently king g2 is a better move. I really don't understand why, because I thought after g takes h2, king takes h2, and queen h5, I'm simply up a pawn here, but it would have been better. And the reason is actually not so obvious. In the game after king takes g3, which is a blunder, there's a very obvious, since I'm using this word over and over again, the very obvious move here to play rook to f7. Now, rook to f7 is, of course, not an obvious move whatsoever, but apparently it's close to winning. And the reason is there's a very nasty idea here. If white plays, say, rook e1, I can check the king, and then I have bishop b7 here, and these bishops guard everything, and I also win this queen on e4 as well, and it's GG, why not? Now, at the end of the day, I think I had looked at something similar. I think I had looked at bishop h4, king g2, and rook f7 here, but in this situation, it doesn't quite work. So after rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, white can play rook to d1, attacking the bishop. If I go bishop b7, thinking I win the game, rook takes d8, check is GG. I have no square on h7, have to block, swap, swap, take, white has these bishops, and I lose. So I think I had considered some bishop h4 line, which didn't quite work, which is why I ended up rejecting rook to f7. Now, to give you guys one final line, after rook f7, there is f5 here, but after f5, black can play queen h7, pinning the pawn on f5, and all these threats still exist down the road on the diagonals here, and black is apparently winning. So instead, I play bishop c8. Now, this is a move that I played pretty quickly because, again, my opponent's getting low on time, and if I don't blunder, it feels very hard for her to play. Weak king here. They're always queen h4, bishop h4 ideas. Now the pawn is guarded. Should white go bishop g4, bishop g2, king g2? There are no obvious moves, and when your opponent is low on time, if there are no obvious moves, that's when you really want to move quickly and try to put pressure on them. If they have easy moves, for example, say this were an endgame. Well, let me give you one example. Let's say we get some endgame like this, just to showcase something. You get some endgame like this. White's moves actually become very easy. Moves like queen c6 or queen a8 or f5. And black doesn't really have threats because all the squares for the bishops are covered by the queen. And white can make a lot of moves easily within 30 seconds. But even beyond that, all the moves can be made in like 3 to 4 seconds. So in this position, it's not that easy. So Vantika plays king g2. Now I play queen to h5 here, targeting the rook on d1. She trades the rooks on d8 and plays this move f5. Now again, very hard to criticize my opponent. She's very low on time. She's trying to release the tension here, trying to get to a position that is more simplified with f5, but it simply loses the game. What she needed to do here is play a move like rook to f3. Now, again, this is a move that looks ridiculous because you're literally putting all your pieces on this diagonal, but black can't take advantage of it. If I play rook d7, oops, bishop takes e6 check, wins the rook on d7, and probably the game. If I try to play like king to f7, now here I think white can go f5, and there are a lot of problems on the f file. Additionally, if I play like bishop d7 here, hoping for rook c8 and bishop c6, it's just too slow. White can play king g1, rook to c8, and now move like rook to g3. And now there's only the queen on this long diagonal. And if I go bishop c6, once again, I lose to this move, bishop takes e6 check. So Vantika plays f5 instead, makes this move with 18 seconds left on the clock, and this effectively loses the game, as we'll see. So I play queen e2 check, she blocks, I go queen d3 here, an excellent move to try and trade the queens off, and now she trades the queens. Now, at this point, everything is pretty close to losing. Probably queen to f3 is a better try, but after e takes f5 here, white can't take on f5 because after bishop takes f5, I trade, and then in this position, I can simply take the bishop, and after queen to e6, I go king h8, queen takes e7, and now I have queen to e4 check. And due to the geometry, this is a checkmate. If you go king f1, there's rook to d1, which is simply a checkmate here. The king has no squares. And of course, it's also a right triangle. If white goes king g3, I have rook d3 check, rook f3, only way to block it. And now we do the ladder mate, takes, check, and mate. So the only other move that white has is move rook to f3 here, but after rook to f3, there's rook to d2 check, king to g3, and now I have queen g6 check. If you go king to f4, let me see if I can find the quickest mate. I think the quickest one is rook d4, king e3. I think it's queen g1, king e2, rook e4, king d3, queen d4, rook e2. And eventually, white's king will get checkmated on the queen side. So queen f3 is a better try, but again, even after ef5, rook d2, for example, after queen c4, takes, bishop takes f5, I can take on a2 a check, trade the bishops on f5 and go queen d5. And here I have 3 connected pawns pushing p up the board, and I will win very soon. So she trades the queens on d3. Now at this point, she's playing only on the increment, so all of her moves are going to be made with very little thought. And at this point, it's close loss. She plays f6. I take with the bishop here. This is not a double exclamation move. In fact, it's the only move, which is why I get so annoyed by the chess.com system sometimes, but it is really the only move here. And the point is that after white takes back, now after rook takes e3, if we do the count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have one extra pawn, but beyond having one extra pawn, there's another big problem for white. If white could put the bishop on g4, for example, here and trade pawns on g7 and play like rook b2, white's very much in the game. But the problem is white is missing one tempo here, and what I mean by that is that here, white wants to play fg7. But if you take, I go bishop b7, checking the king. You can't block. You have to move the king, and then I take the bishop and win the game. So white is one move short here, which is why Vantika plays bishop g4. But now I go bishop b7 check. She goes king g1. And now I have bishop to a6, a little tickle maneuver. And the reason I go for this tickle maneuver is that in the endgame, I want to force this king one square backwards so the king doesn't get towards the center as quickly. Of course, if she were to play bishop f3, for example, I can just trade everything off here. And in this position, I simply have two extra pawns. It's a very easy king and pawn endgame. So she goes king g1. I play bishop a6, trying to win this pawn on c4 and use my connect 3 to win the game. She plays rook f4, and now I take on f6. Now, I did actually see this move, g5, which the computer likes and is winning, but I didn't play this move, so I felt that after f7, king f8, rook f6, when I take on c4, white has bishop to h5 here, and it looks kind of scary, because if I play like a6, white can go rook h6, rook h8, and win the game with the pawn on f7. Now, the computer says after rook e1, king g2, bishop e2. This is just winning. Again, very, very dank idea. If white goes king f2, there's rook f1 winning the rook. If white plays rook takes e6, then there's bishop f3, creating the classic fossil. And so this should be winning. But again, in this position, I know that I can be ahead by 2 pawns. And if I'm going to be up 2 pawns in this endgame, I know I'm going to win this like 99% of the time. So I decided to take on f6, because now if white takes, I take on c4, and I guard the pawn and attack the pawn on a2. We got king f2, rook e5. She decides to take. If she doesn't take the pawn here, say you go bishop e2, now I can simply go king g7, and I have 2 connected pawns in the center, and this should be pretty straightforward as well. So she takes, I take on c4, guarding the pawn on e6 here, and targeting the pawn on a2. She plays a3. I go bishop d5 here, creating the classic wooden shield in the middle of the board with the idea of playing c4 and c3. The game continues with h4. I go rook e4, king g3, and now I play king g7, rook f2, and I go c4. Now, I did use a little bit of time here. I have to be a little bit careful because white does have one last trick in the hat, which is say I play a move like a6, h5, a5. This is still winning, of course, but let's just say white gets king h4, a4, and king g5. Suddenly, there are all these threats with h6 and king g6 down the road, potentially. Like if I go like, I don't know, rook e1, h6, king g8, king g6, suddenly white has this very active king. There are serious threats of checkmate, and it's not even clear if black is winning anymore. So there's this one last trick with this h5, king h4, king g5 idea. And so I had to do a little bit of calculation here, but ultimately I played the best move, the most explosive move in the position, c4. So after c4, she plays h5, and now I go c3, correctly calculating that after king h4, I can go rook c4, the bishop is pinned, but I'm also threatening to push p with c2 and c1. And after king g5, c2, h6, king g8, it's simply gg, pawn on e6 is guarded. I'm threatening to queen next move with check. If white plays king g6, I go bishop e4, checking the king, getting a queen, and then this is simply a win for black. So she goes bishop d1. Now I play rook to d4, bishop c2, rook to d2. And at this point, Vantika probably should have resigned the game. I'm not going to say that, it's like required or anything, but at this point, we end up in a theoretically winning bishop and pawn endgame where I have 2 extra pawns. But besides having 2 extra pawns in this endgame, it's also bishops of the same color. So it should be pretty basic. So we get king f4. I go e5 check. She plays king e3. If she were to take on e5, I have bishop to f3. And this is actually winning for me. Excuse me. Because in this position, there's only one trick, which is I can't take because then this... Oh, actually, this is winning here because the bishop is actually on the right square, and I'm winning this game here due to Zugzwang. King has to move, and then I can push the pawn. But nonetheless, this actually is also winning. But just to illustrate the point, I can even go bishop e2, king to d6, and a move like bishop a6 here. And this is also just winning because in this position, if white trades, now it's not an edge pawn, so I can just capture the pawn, bring the king over, and promote. And if white tries to go king c7, then I can just take, and suddenly I'm pushing the p down the board, and I'm simply getting a queen. So all roads lead to Rome here. So she plays king e3. I go bishop f7, takes, bishop h5, king c3, and now I play bishop e8. Probably the best move here, and the reason is that if white goes king c4 here, I can go bishop c6, cutting off any entries. The king simply has no squares available, and then I can walk my king up and start pushing p on the e file. So she plays bishop d3 instead. I go king f6, and now she plays king c4. Probably king d2 is the best move here, just to stop me from running the e-pawn. But after bishop c6, king e3, it's a very simple win here, just to illustrate. We get to some position like this, for example, and now I can just start pushing the wide peepos here on both sides of the board. And really the only thing is to remember that here I take with the a-pawn. Now, king takes is also winning, but again, I have to be careful, because if I'm not careful here, white gets the king to the corner, this is a theoretical draw. But the way that I win this is just play b4, take with the a-pawn. So now we have the wide peepos, but there's nothing on the edge, so no tricks of a bishop sacking for a pawn. And after bishop d3, I go b3, king d2, king b4, king c1, king c3. And then eventually I go b2, king b1, and I push e4, bishop g6, e3, threatening e2 and e1. And if bishop h5, then I have bishop e4. I promote the pawn and win the game. So instead she plays king c4. I go bishop c6. Not required, but I want to be technically sound here. So the king has no entries. She plays bishop c2, king g5, a4. I play a5 here, fixing all my pawns on the opposite color of the light square bishop, while my bishop targets the lone white pawn. So we get king d3, king f4, king e2, e4, bishop b3, e3, bishop c2, and now I play b5. Now, b5 is not the only way to win. There are many different ways to win this position. Bishop to f3 is also winning, so if king d3, I can trade the b-shops. And after king to e1, now I can just slowly walk my king all the way over to the queen side, and then go bishop c6, king e2, bishop a4, and something like this, bishop b3 with a4, a3, a2, and I will win the game as well. But instead, I play b5 for the content, because obviously we have to play for the means. And in this position, you're going to see that the wide peepos are simply too wide here, and I'm simply winning. So we get king d1, a4, king c1. I go a3 here. There was one funny line, by the way, here, which is a draw, which is king to f3. King c1, you're like e2, right? Black's winning, because king d2, king f2, push the pawn, win the game. But after e2, white has this remarkable move, bishop to d1, pinning the pawn on e2. And after takes king d1, this is actually a draw, because now the white king gets to the corner and can stop the a-pawn. So I play a4 here. She goes king c1, I go a3, just pushing the wide peepos to where each is one square away from queening. We get bishop d1, or two squares away, I should say, and now I play bishop to d3 here. Now, in this position, there are many ways to win. If I really wanted to show you guys how to win another way, we can get to this endgame where even here, after king a3, this is winning, so I have bishop to f3, trading the bishops, and if you move away, I can push the pawn and get a queen. So there are many different ways to win, but I didn't see any reason to prolong the game. So I go bishop d3 here, which cuts this king off. The king is stuck in this little box here, and now it's just an easy routine win. We get bishop h5, and I believe I played king e5 here, and then she resigned. I think king e5 didn't register on the board, because when the game ends, you put the kings on e5 and d4 when it's over. Now, after king e5, she resigns simply because I can walk this king to c3, and now white can't stop both of the peepos. If you stay on this diagonal, I have a2, a1, winning the game since the king can't get over. And if you try to stop the a-pawn with bishop f7, now I push the e-pawn, and the king still can't get over, and I queen on e1. So one of the wide peepos is getting through here and will promote to a queen, and because of that, she resigns this game after king e5. So I win my first game against Vantika Agrawal from India, one of the top Indian female players. Very, very tough game. Probably the middle game could have, I mean, maybe she could have played a little better. I think at the end of the day, she used a little bit too much time in some critical moments, and that really did cost her. And I think that's one thing that a lot of players who are amateurs, or even say like FMs or IMs, don't really understand or utilize enough, is that when your opponent is getting low on time, there's certain moments when you have to turn the gears and you have to try and start pressuring them on the clock as well as the board. So overall, pretty good stuff. Tough game, but I do get the win in the first round of the Qatar Masters. Magnus Carlsen won his first round. Anish Giri also won. D. Gukesh from India, one of the Fab Four. He was the only one of the top four players who only drew his game. But at any rate, I'm on 1 out of 1. Tomorrow, I will most likely play with the white pieces in round 2 here of the Qatar Masters in Doha. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the first game of this event from me. And I will be back soon with some more great YouTube-only content. Make sure to smash that subscribe button below if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys tomorrow after round numero 2. See you guys. Bye.